A broke diner waitress, a ruthless billionaire, a fake engagement that spirals into a deadly trap. Nina Carter only wanted to save her sick sister, but when she's framed and rescued by cold, powerful Adrian Wolfe, she steps into a dangerous world of lies, betrayal, and unexpected love. From back-alley kidnappings to gala showdowns, this isn't just a love story. It's a fight for dignity, truth, and redemption. Who will survive when love collides with power? Stick around to find out. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below and subscribe for more heart-gripping, unforgettable stories like this one. Rain pounded the cracked pavement of South Chicago as thunder rolled in the distance like a warning. Neon signs flickered uncertainly above shuttered storefronts, casting broken halos of red and green light over the slick sidewalk. Nina Carter pulled the frayed hood of her sweatshirt tighter over her head, her canvas sneakers squishing with every step. She'd just finished another double shift at the greasy diner down on Halsted, and her tips, barely $30, were stuffed in her back pocket, damp and crumpled. She'd hoped for more tonight. Zoe's prescription had run out again. She paused under the awning of a liquor store, letting the rain drip from her lashes as she checked the time. Past midnight. She should have been home an hour ago, but her boss had begged her to cover for someone who didn't show. Again. Nina didn't say no to extra shifts, not when her 14-year-old sister needed meds and the hospital bills piled up like bricks on her chest. As she turned down a side street, her heart sank. A police cruiser idled at the far end, its headlights cutting through the mist. She felt a jolt of unease as the car crept toward her, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The doors swung open. 2 officers stepped out, one tall and stone-faced, the other scribbling in a notepad. "Nina Carter?" the tall one asked, his voice clipped. She blinked. "Yeah? You're under investigation for theft. A diamond bracelet reported missing from Rosie's diner earlier tonight was found near your locker." "What?" Nina's voice shot up. "That's insane. I didn't take anything." "Save it for the precinct," the other officer said, already reaching for her arms. "Wait, please, I didn't." But the metal of the handcuffs was already biting into her wrists. She stumbled as they guided her toward the cruiser, water sloshing into her shoes. Her thoughts blurred. Zoe. The pills. Rent due next week. She tried to breathe, to scream, to fight, but all she could manage was a hoarse whisper. "You've got the wrong person." At the station, the fluorescent lights buzzed mercilessly overhead. Nina sat in the holding room, soaked and shivering, her wrists red and her pride bruised. Her voice was hoarse from repeating the same line, "I didn't take it," but the officers barely looked at her. To them, she was just another low-income statistic with no lawyer and no hope. Then the door opened, and everything shifted. The man who stepped in looked like he didn't belong within 100 miles of this place. Tall, sharply dressed in a black coat over a gray suit, hair slicked back, clean-shaven jaw like something out of a magazine. But it was his eyes that struck Nina, cold, steel blue, and focused solely on her. Like he already knew her, like he'd been looking for her. "I'm Adrian Wolfe," he said, flashing a badge of some kind. "Private security? Corporate authority?" Nina couldn't tell. "The bracelet in question is mine. I'm not pressing charges." The officers hesitated, confused. One opened his mouth to object, but Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Release her." They did. As the cuffs were unlocked and Nina rubbed her sore wrists, she turned toward him, her heart thudding. "Why?" she demanded. "I don't know you." "You will," he replied, his voice low. "Come with me. I have a proposition." Every instinct screamed to run the other way. But Zoe needed her. The money, the medicine, the second chance. So Nina followed the man in the dark suit into the rain, into a waiting car with leather seats and the faint scent of sandalwood. She didn't know his name 5 minutes ago. Now he might be the only person who could save her life. Or ruin it forever. The car hummed softly beneath her as it sliced through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. Nina sat stiffly in the back seat of the sleek black vehicle, her damp clothes clinging to her, shoes leaving muddy prints on the leather floor mats. She glanced at Adrian Wolfe, who sat beside her like a man sculpted from ice. Flawless, distant, unrateable. The city lights streaked across his sharp cheekbones and tight jawline, but he didn't look at her. Not until the car slowed to a stop in front of a towering glass building that shimmered like a blade in the night. "I don't understand what this is," she said, finally breaking the silence. You show up at the precinct, wave your magic card, and suddenly the theft disappears? Adrian turned to her, his blue eyes cool but focused. It wasn't magic, Nina. It was leverage. She scoffed. Right, and what does that make me? The reason my plan still works, he replied, stepping out of the car before she could question him further. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, except for the soft ding of passing levels. When the doors opened, Nina stepped into a penthouse that looked more like a high-end gallery than someone's home. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean marble floors, minimalist furniture, and the smell of money in the air. Adrian loosened his tie, finally breaking the silence. I need a fake fiancé. Nina blinked. Excuse me? I'm finalizing a major merger in 2 weeks. Investors are skeptical after a recent scandal involving my ex. They want to see stability, commitment, loyalty, and nothing screams trust like a devoted woman by your side. You dragged me out of a jail cell, Nina said, voice rising, to fake date you? Not date, Adrian corrected. Fiancé, there's a difference. She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You're insane. I prefer calculating. He walked to a sleek bar cart and poured himself a glass of whiskey, offering her one, which she declined. In return, he continued, I'll pay off your sister's medical bills, give you a monthly stipend, and ensure your name is cleared completely. Nina crossed her arms, biting down her panic. Zoe's face flashed in her mind, the way her sister clutched her stomach some nights, too weak to speak. The overdue bills sitting like landmines in their tiny kitchen. And what do I have to do? Appear at events, smile, play the role, nothing more. He paused, looking her square in the eyes. I won't touch you unless you say I can, and if you want out at any time, you walk. No consequences. His tone was calm, even respectful, but it still felt like a trap with velvet walls. Nina paced for a moment, then looked at him hard. Why me? You could hire a model, an actress, someone who knows what they're doing. Because you're real, he said simply. You didn't cry at the station. You didn't beg. And when I walked in, you looked at me like I was just another guy. No one does that. She let out a dry laugh. Maybe I didn't recognize you. I'm not exactly up to date on Forbes lists. Adrian smiled faintly. Exactly. Nina fell silent, the offer weighing heavy in the air. It wasn't just the money. It was a way out, a new beginning, a chance to stop drowning. But her mother's voice echoed in her head. Don't give yourself away unless it's for love. I have conditions, she said finally. You don't touch me unless I allow it, and if I say I'm done, you let me go. No scenes, no drama. Adrian nodded once, solemn, agreed. She took a breath, bracing herself for the storm she knew was coming. Then I'm in. Adrian extended his hand, and for the first time she took it. His grip was firm, steady, dangerous. But Nina Carter had survived worse than danger. She just hadn't survived love. Not yet. The days that followed were a blur of silk gowns, camera flashes, and whispered instructions. Nina Carter, once just a diner waitress scraping by in South Chicago, was now arm in arm with one of the most powerful men in the city. Adrian Wolfe, polished and unreadable, introduced her to a world of luxury she'd only glimpsed in department store windows. Her reflection in the mirror each night felt like someone else's life. Makeup smoothed her rough edges, designer dresses clung to her curves, and heels replaced her worn-out sneakers. But no amount of transformation could erase the steel in her spine or the fire in her eyes. Their first public appearance was a fundraising gala for children's health research, ironic, considering Zoe's current fight. Nina walked beside Adrian, their hands loosely clasped, every step calculated. The air buzzed with curiosity. Some guests offered polite smiles, others narrowed their eyes, trying to figure her out. But Nina, chin held high, played her part with quiet dignity. When asked about her background, she answered truthfully. I grew up in South Chicago. My sister's been sick. I've worked every job I could to keep her alive. Adrian didn't flinch at her honesty. In fact, he watched her with something close to admiration, though he said nothing. But she caught it. The way his jaw softened when she spoke, the way his hand tightened around hers when a board member made a snide comment about her being street pretty. Nina shot the man a look that made him recoil. Adrian only smirked. Back at the penthouse, the elevator ride was silent until Nina turned to him. I know what they think, she said, that I'm some charity case or PR stunt. Adrian poured a glass of wine and handed her water. Let them think what they want. They don't matter. Don't they? She challenged. You dragged me into this war with your ex and your corporate enemies. Don't pretend I'm not a weapon. He met her gaze. You're not a weapon, Nina. You're a shield. The words unsettled her in ways she didn't fully understand. That night, she lay awake in the guest bedroom, larger than her entire apartment, thinking about what he meant. Was she really protecting him, or was he trying to protect himself from someone else? As the days passed, the line between pretense and something else began to blur. There were quiet mornings when they'd share coffee, hers black, his with a single sugar cube. She teased him when he burned toast, and he deadpanned that she clearly had zero culinary training either. They laughed, real laughter, not rehearsed, not staged, just normal. One night, after a late charity dinner, they returned to the penthouse and found themselves alone on the balcony. The city lights below looked like fallen stars. Nina leaned against the railing, the wind tugging at her hair. You're quiet, Adrian said, stepping beside her. Just thinking about Zoe, she admitted, and how weird all this is. A few weeks ago, I was dodging landlords and counting tips. Now I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. You're not pretending, he said, his voice low. Not really. She turned to him, brows raised. You think I belong here? I think you belong wherever you decide to stand. The way he looked at her then made her pulse stutter, not with the cold calculation she'd grown used to, but with something warmer. Something real. Before she could step away, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, fingers barely grazing her cheek. Her breath hitched. I shouldn't, he murmured. Then don't, she said, but her voice was soft. They kissed. Not like strangers in a deal, but like two people forgetting what had brought them here. For a second, the world stopped. No contracts, no cameras, just his mouth on hers and the terrifying possibility that she was falling. When they pulled apart, his hand lingered at her waist. This changes things, he said. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted it to. The fallout didn't hit all at once. It started with a whisper, a photo, a headline buried on page 3 of a tabloid. From diner girl to diamond arm candy. Is Nina Carter the real deal, or a paid fantasy? Nina stared at the image on the screen, her own face looking foreign beneath layers of makeup, caught mid-smile beside Adrian in a borrowed dress. Her stomach sank. The article speculated everything, her intentions, her past, and most painfully, her price. Julian Blake had finally made his move. Adrian stormed into the penthouse that morning, the newspaper crumpled in his hand, tension radiating from every inch of him. We need to talk, he said, jaw tight. He threw the paper onto the coffee table, the headline visible like a wound. Did you speak to anyone? Leak anything? Nina flinched, more from his tone than the accusation. No, of course not. You sure? His eyes burned. Because this article has details no one else outside this apartment should know. She stood up, her voice sharp. You think I sold you out? I'm not accusing. Yes, you are. You're just too polished to say it outright. Adrian pinched the bridge of his nose, muttering something under his breath. Julian's behind this. He's trying to sabotage the deal. By painting me as your escort, she snapped. By calling my life a transaction? Adrian looked at her then, really looked, and something softened in his expression. But it was too late. The damage was done. Nina walked into the guest room, slammed the door, and packed her bag with trembling hands. She didn't want his money. Not like this. Before leaving, she scribbled a note on a sheet of his stationery. I didn't betray you, but thanks for showing me where I really stand. She was gone before he could stop her. Nina didn't go far. Just back to the small apartment she'd kept on the south side, where peeling paint and leaky faucets welcomed her like old friends. She sat on the couch, stared at the silence, and felt the collapse of whatever had been building between them. She thought she was done with the nightmare, but it wasn't done with her. 3 nights later, after grabbing groceries and Zoe's medication, she stepped off the bus and was met with headlights. A black SUV blocked her path. 2 men in dark suits approached her, fast. Nina Carter? One said, voice cold. She backed away. Who's asking? The boss wants a word. Before she could scream, a cloth was pressed to her face. The world tilted and went black. She woke tied to a metal chair in what looked like an abandoned office building. Dusty floors, broken lights. Her head throbbed, her wrists ached. Across from her, Seated casually on a folding chair was Julian Blake. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, smiling like a shark. "Hope the ride wasn't too rough." "What do you want?" she croaked. "To make Adrian bleed," Julian said smoothly. "And you, dear Nina, are my leverage." He held up a phone. On it, a paused video of her, tied up, bruised, helpless. "I send him this," Julian continued, "and I promise he'll walk away from his merger, or he loses you." "You won't get away with this," she hissed. He laughed. "Who's going to believe you? A girl from the slums playing Cinderella?" Back at the penthouse, Adrian sat in the dark, staring at the note she left, heart heavy with guilt. When his phone buzzed, he answered without thinking, only to be greeted by the image of Nina, bound and terrified. Julian's voice followed. "Walk away, Wolf, or lose her." Adrian didn't hesitate. He stood, grabbed his keys, and called in every favor he had. He didn't care about the billion-dollar deal. He didn't care about the fallout. He only cared about Nina. He was going to get her back, or burn everything down trying. Rain lashed against the windshield as Adrian gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, his heart pounding louder than the storm outside. The address his team had traced was scrawled on a slip of paper beside him, a derelict warehouse on the edge of the city, one of Julian's old shell properties. He didn't wait for backup. He couldn't. The moment he saw that video, saw Nina's face bruised, tied to a chair with fear burning behind her defiance, something inside him snapped. Not as a CEO, not as a strategist, but as a man who realized too late that he was in love with the one person he never planned to care about. The warehouse loomed like a beast in the shadows, all rusted metal and shattered glass. Adrian stepped out, rain soaking through his suit in seconds. He drew the pistol he kept locked in his car. He hadn't fired it in years, but tonight wasn't about negotiation. It was about Nina. Inside, the building echoed with hollow silence. Then a voice cut through the dark. "Right on time, Wolf." Julian stepped into the flickering light, flanked by two of his men. Behind them, Nina sat on the ground, wrists bound, blood dried at the corner of her mouth, but her eyes lit up the second she saw Adrian. "You're predictable," Julian said, smirking. "That's your problem. You're going to regret touching her." Adrian growled, his voice a storm barely contained. Julian chuckled. Big words from a man about to lose everything. The deal, the company, the girl. But hey, at least you made it dramatic. One of the goons stepped forward, gun raised. That's when Nina moved. In a flash of courage only she could summon, she twisted her body, kicked upward, and threw her weight into the guard's legs. The gun went off, hitting a pipe behind them with a sharp crack. Adrian didn't wait. He charged, tackling the second guard while Nina scrambled toward cover. The next moments were chaos, shouting, fists the metallic echo of a dropped weapon. Adrian disarmed one man, knocking him unconscious with a brutal elbow. The second ran. Julian reached for his own weapon, but before he could aim, Nina grabbed a broken pipe and swung it hard into his side. He crumpled to the floor, gasping. Adrian rushed to her side, helping her to her feet, his hands trembling as he checked her face. "Are you okay?" he whispered, voice raw. She nodded, tears springing to her eyes, not from fear, but from relief. "You came. I'd burn the world to find you," he breathed. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. His security team had finally arrived. Hours later, after statements were given and Julian was in cuffs, Nina sat wrapped in a blanket in the backseat of Adrian's car. He didn't say much as he drove, just kept glancing at her like he was afraid she'd vanish again. When they arrived at the penthouse, she hesitated at the door. "I can't do this, Adrian," she said quietly. "Not again. Not unless I know it's real." He turned to face her, drenched, exhausted, but eyes burning with truth. "It's real. Every second with you. Every moment I was too proud to say what I felt. You didn't trust me." "I was scared," he admitted, "because you're not just someone I hired. You're the only person who's ever seen me and not wanted something, except maybe to be loved." Nina looked away, her voice soft. "And do you love me?" He didn't hesitate. "With everything I have. But that's not enough, not unless you believe it too." She stepped closer, searching his face. "I believe you, but I need to know that you'll see me as your partner, not a project, not a shield, just me." Adrian cupped her face gently, brushing away a raindrop, or maybe a tear. "I don't want anything else." She kissed him then, slowly, fully, as if anchoring them both to this moment. Weeks passed. Julian's arrest made headlines, But Nina stayed quiet, turning down interviews, turning inward. Instead, she went back to the neighborhood, to Zoe, to her roots. And Adrian, he followed, not as a shadow, but as a partner. He didn't rebuild her. He stood beside her while she rebuilt herself. One spring morning, beneath a quiet blue sky, they opened a new youth center in South Chicago, funded in part by Adrian Wolfe, designed by Nina Carter. On the front was a simple plaque, "For the brave hearts who never stop fighting." And beneath it, in smaller letters, "She was never just a girl from the diner, she was the storm." At the heart of the price of her silence lies a powerful lesson. Our worth is never defined by where we come from, but by who we choose to become. Nina Carter was never just a girl from the slums or a pawn in someone else's game. She was a fighter, a protector, and above all, a woman who refused to let her circumstances dictate her value. She showed us that even when life pushes you to the edge, you still have the power to stand tall, to walk away from what breaks you, and to fight for what matters. Adrian Wolfe, a man wrapped in power and pride, learned that love isn't control, it's surrender. It's seeing someone not as a possession, but as a partner. Through Nina, he discovered that vulnerability is not weakness, but the first step toward healing. Their story reminds us that trust is fragile, but when rebuilt with honesty, it becomes unbreakable. That love, real love, is not born in grand gestures, but in the quiet, everyday moments. The laughter in the kitchen, the comfort of shared silence, the courage to stay when it's easier to run. And perhaps the most important truth of all, redemption is possible. For those who've made mistakes, for those who've been wronged, there is always a chance to begin again. Thank you for staying with us through this unforgettable journey. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Drop your city in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more soul-stirring real stories of love, courage, and second chances.